Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be, good day. And if you're watching this on a recording, hello future people. My name is Jeff Fritz, and today I'm going to talk to you about Telerik Platform and Visual Studio, building cross-platform mobile apps using Visual Studio. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Jeff Fritz. I'm a Telerik developer advocate who specializes in ASP.NET. I'm not used to building these mobile apps like many other people. I live in the web. I like building things with HTML and JavaScript. And a little bit of C# on the server side never hurt anyone. I'm a Microsoft MVP, an ASP insider. You can find me putting content on Pluralsight. I'm an iNeta community champion, and you can find me at a number of different conferences and community events. You can listen to me yap on some podcasts like .NET Rocks and The Tablet Show. All right, enough about me. Let's get into this thing. Now, let's take a look at the Telerik platform. There's a lot going on here that I want to get you up to speed on quickly. First, there's Telerik AppBuilder in there. That'll help you build applications using HTML and JavaScript with compile in the cloud services. We also have Telerik backend services. This is data storage, file storage, and authentication capabilities, as well as notification services, all being served and managed from the cloud. Telerik Analytics. This allows you to add on to any of your applications a series of APIs that will monitor what your customers are doing, any errors that are thrown, report them back to a central dashboard that you can view from anywhere. And Telerik Mobile Testing. This will allow you to write simple tests using JavaScript that will run on Android, iOS, or on any web UI so that you can find out if your applications are still working as designed. The Telerik platform gives you everything you need to build applications for any screen. All of our existing UI controls work together synchronously with the Telerik platform to give you an amazing development experience. But for the rest of this webinar, I want to really focus on Telerik AppBuilder because that's got some exciting capabilities for our .NET developers. I want to talk to you first about the mobile landscape before we get too far into exactly what Telerik is trying to do here with AppBuilder. Okay? Now, in the first quarter of 2013, there was a tremendous amount of sales for Android and iOS. Windows Phone, look at it. It's this little orange sliver here. BlackBerry is a blip on the radar here also. But this is from Q1 2013. We know these numbers are even more shifted towards Android in Q1 2014. This is a lot of development available for us, a lot of potential customers hanging out there. I mean, 160 million Android users, 37 million iOS users. That's a lot. We're talking about almost 200 million devices out there that we can target and make big sales, big bucks, right? That's what we're all in this for. 84% of mobile developers right now are targeting iOS, Android, or HTML5 as their main development platform. That's a lot of non.NET development. Only 4.5% of developers are targeting Windows Phone. That takes my .NET skill set and says, you know what, I need to be shifting here and looking at these other things, the Android and the iOS. But it's so complex for me to get involved and work with those other environments because I live and breathe in Visual Studio, right? I'm sure many of you have felt the same way. I've spoken to developers out there who are concerned about how do I get into those environments? I mean, take a look at this. Look at how complex the platform is. If I want to build for Apple, I need Objective-C language skills, and then I need to install Xcode and run on Mac OS. But I can also build Android on Mac OS, but I need to know Java and run inside of Eclipse. But I'm used to the third one there, Windows, and I know a little bit of XAML and C#, and I'm very familiar with Visual Studio. And I'm of course, the web guy. I like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. There's multiple operating systems out there for me. I can't run on all of these. I've got one machine. Does my office really want to supply me with multiple machines so I can target iOS and Android? Look, there's three options we can break this down to. Native mobile development, mobile web development, and hybrid mobile development. Let me explain a little bit about that. Now, native development, well, that's that single platform that we saw. I'm going to be programming in just Objective-C, or just Java, or just C#, and I'm only going to get capabilities for one of those platforms that will run and be installed inside the App Store. There's a high development cost that comes along with this because I need to build separately for each one of those devices. If I'm going to get to 90% coverage in the app stores, I'm going to need to build 3 different apps. And that takes a lot of time. On the far right with the mobile web, well, I know how to build HTML and JavaScript with CSS, so I can immediately target multiple platforms. All of my code will be reused. However, I can't do a lot with the native sensors on the device. I'm not going to be able to get a lot of feedback, work with geolocation, work with the camera. And my graphics capabilities, it's a little bit touchy. I'm going to have to put down different graphics for different devices, and I'm going to need to store them all on my web server and serve them up appropriately based on the device size and this whole responsive web design thing. It's a lot to take in mind here. However, in the middle is the hybrid approach, right? Where we can target multiple platforms with my HTML and JavaScript skill set. And that means it's going to be a reasonable development cost. I can build once and target multiple platforms. The framework will give me access to those native APIs. I can use the camera and geolocation and figure out what's going on. There's a moderate amount of graphics capabilities that I can do, and I can get in the App Store. Where with the mobile web, I'm relying on somebody to put a bookmark on their start screen. All 3 of these approaches are valid within the Telerik platform. We support native capabilities through native iOS, Android, Windows desktop controls, WPF controls, all kinds of tools for that. We support the mobile web through our Kendo UI and ASP.NET AJAX and MVC extensions with Kendo UI. We also support the hybrid strategy through our AppBuilder product. The playing field looks like this. If I build native apps, I'm on a single platform on the far left there, but I've got the full capabilities of the platform. And if I build for the web with HTML5, well, I'm going to hit multiple platforms, but I'm not going to get all the capabilities of the device. I really like what's in the top right there, the hybrid development option. I can use my web developer skills, I'm going to get access to the native platform, and I can get into the App Store. That's tremendous for me. In Vision Mobile Developer Economics in 2013, they say developers most often use several cross-platform tools. On average, developers will use 1.9 cross-platform tools. You're already using more than one tool to build your applications. So let's think about that, and maybe there's a way for us to bring that back, simplify the process, and get down to an environment where we can maximize our efficiencies, simplify our development processes, and satisfy everybody and get to all the platforms at once. Moreover, Vision Mobile Developer Economics found that 1 in 4 developers will use more than 3 cross-platform tools. There we go. That's targeting the native, the mobile web, and even desktop web, or maybe multiple mobile native environments, iOS, Android, and then mobile web and desktop web. We can do a lot better than this, okay? So this is where I want to introduce the Telerik solution, hybrid mobile development in the cloud, called Telerik AppBuilder. Let me break down AppBuilder for you. We leverage the PhoneGap framework, also known as Apache Cordova. That means you can program in HTML with JavaScript and CSS. These are things we're all familiar with. You get access to the native APIs through JavaScript capabilities, and it runs in a native application container. You're going to get a lot of the speed that you would expect from a native application. With AppBuilder, we provide what we call compiler as a service. Now, normally, you have to manage the software development kits, the native container, and web assets that you're building with. Let Telerik build it for you, and we'll give you an installer for each one of your targets, okay? That means less that you need to worry about, and you can focus on your code. You don't have to worry about your development environment, your configuration environment. We're going to make it easy for you to get in and get started. Let's put this into some pictures for you. We're going to change this where you're going to program on your PC or your Mac, and you're going to push through some SDKs and compilers and end up delivering iOS, Android, and Windows executables. No. Let's make it this. Whatever device you're programming on, you're going to submit your application code through Telerik AppBuilder, and we're going to give you iOS, Android, and now Windows Phone executables. That's tremendous. That's less for you to worry about, less to manage, and it's all being taken care of by Telerik. How do you get started? What IDEs are out there for you? Well, I started this presentation talking about Visual Studio, so I've got to tell you, there's a Visual Studio plugin for this, but there's also an in-browser client as part of the Telerik platform. That means any device that you have that has a browser, you can start up that browser, browse to our platform.telerik.com website, and you can start coding on an app. Think about it. You can write an app with a tablet. Now it's one of those Inception things where you're building an app with an app on a device. That's confusing. Look, you can also build with a Windows client. We've written our own editor that you can install in Windows 7 and Windows 8 and run just the development processes locally on your desktop. And finally, of course, we have the Visual Studio extension, and that'll work in versions of Visual Studio including 2010, 2012, and 2013. Let me first tell you a little bit about the Telerik Platform in-browser client. This runs it, like I said, in all major browsers. It has IntelliSense code completion and syntax highlighting for you. These are the things you expect from a robust, rich IDE, and we've got it for you in browser. You're worried about source control? No problem. We connect it to any accessible Git repository out there on the web. And it has an in-browser PhoneGap or Cordova emulator for testing. You don't need to bring up another application, another browser. We do it all for you. When you're running on the platform, though, we have these other capabilities available to you. Back-end services, testing, and analytics. I'll show you that in a little bit when we get to the platform and I take you on a tour. The Visual Studio extension enables you to write hybrid mobile apps in those versions of Visual Studio I mentioned, 2010, 2012, and 2013. You have full control over version control, right? You can use your native TFS, a Git repository, or push up to a remote web-based Git repository like GitHub or Bitbucket. When you're ready to compile, it uploads your code to AppBuilder's build services, and you get an installer coming back to you on the desktop. Now, I mentioned a simulator there so you can see and work with debugging. All three IDE options come with a simulator. On the web, using the platform client, it uses your in-browser tools and the PhoneGap emulator. It looks and feels just like your browser. However, with the Windows client and with Visual Studio, there's a WebKit-based simulator that will be installed and available to you running locally. It has powerful debugging and profiling tools. It's going to feel just like normal when you hit F12 and go through and are able to debug your JavaScript. Now, the really cool feature that we have here is something we call QR code deployment. What this means is that when you go do your build with AppBuilder, we're going to show you a QR code that you can scan with a mobile device and install a debug version of your application on that device without having to provision through iOS or go through Android and have to go through a deployment process, hooking up a device to your desktop. No, this is all done wirelessly with a network-connected mobile device. Scan the QR code, and it'll provision that application, and you can walk through it on your device seamlessly with no problems. And when you're done debugging, you can publish straight to the Apple and Google App Stores. You don't need a Mac. Okay? If you're like me, I've only got a Lenovo sitting here that I work with every day. I'm living in Visual Studio. I don't have room for a Mac here. I don't want to carry a Mac around. I want to stay focused on my Visual Studio environment using a nice touchscreen device like this. I can publish directly to those app stores. No need for an external device. It just works. That's pretty cool to have. But even better, when I'm working with my user interface inside those IDEs, we can make it even better with Kendo UI Mobile. It now is included with AppBuilder. If you're not familiar with Kendo UI Mobile, it will automatically detect the version of the device that's requesting content from it and apply an appropriate CSS skin to it so that you get native theming. It's going to look like it belongs on that iOS device or Android device. The performance of the CSS and JavaScript widgets in this framework is amazing, okay? There's a bunch of UI widgets and an app framework available for you out there. We've also got Telerik backend services available for you, something we call backend as a service. So you can use JavaScript, .NET, iOS, HTTP client APIs to interact with that. There's SDKs out there for all of those environments that you can download and install. You don't need to be building a mobile app to interact with our backend services. We've also got Telerik Analytics for you. Now these are application analytics that you can install and run so you know how your customers are using your application and you can figure out where are their performance issues. Were there any errors that happened inside my application that caused problems for my customers? Where are the pain points that I want to work through and make my application better for my end users? You can learn about all of that using Telerik Analytics. I'm going to bring up the platform website right now and show you how we can get started signing up and working on the Telerik platform. Here I am logged into the platform.telerik.com website. Now the first time you come here, you're going to be prompted to log in or create a new account. Go ahead and do that. You'll get free access to the platform and all the capabilities of it. So the first time you log in, you're going to get access to something called the Friends Sample app. Let's take a look at what's in there. Here you can see the 4 different project capabilities inside of a workspace on the platform. Backend services, AppBuilder hybrid app development service, mobile testing capabilities, and analytics. Great, I can work with these services from the web, or I can come up here and click this download link, find some sample applications to work with, or my SDKs and tools. That's pretty cool. I'm already used to working with Kendo UI, but I want to work in Visual Studio. So I'm going to step away from the web application and start up Visual Studio and bring up a website that I've been working on for a sample game store that I manage. Here's my web application inside Visual Studio called fritz.samplestore. And this is a simple storefront application that I wrote that allows us to track orders that are placed by customers. Here's my API that I have running on my sample website. It's a standard web API controller called Order Controller with a get method, be able to get by ID, post, put, and delete. You can check out the sample code later in the download that's attached to this webinar. I've already deployed this website to Windows Azure so that my customers can get to it and be able to place their orders with me. Let me show you what that looks like. So here we are on Jeff's Game Shop. It's got a nice responsive design, and I've got one of my favorite grids put on this screen so that we can see my customers, where I need to ship their orders to, and the items that they've ordered. Pretty vanilla screen here, but you know what? I want to be able to get this information into a handheld for my guys in the warehouse so they can do their pick and pack tasks without having to print out. That's just a mess. I want to get a mobile app involved here so that I don't have to worry about building and maintaining this website for different devices. Let's get something on a phone that'll just work. And you know what? I've got some iPhone 4S's laying around here. It'd be great if I could install on those. They're a little bit older, but you know what? I won't mind so much if there's a problem with the device if it gets dropped in the warehouse. So let's take a look at adding a mobile application to this so that my pick and pack people can look at and work with the orders in the warehouse. I'm going to go back to Visual Studio. Now, in my Visual Studio, I already have the AppBuilder extension installed. Let me show you how you can install it. Tools, Extensions and Updates. I'll go to Online and search for Telerik AppBuilder. Telerik AppBuilder extension for Visual Studio. Click and install that, and you'll be off and running. I've already got my website installed and working with Git. You can see that in my Team Explorer and the branches that I've been managing. So let's add my first hybrid application to this and get started building a simple set of screens so that my pick and pack people can work with the data that's already exposed on Windows Azure. I'll add a new project. Under the new Telerik item here on the left, I'll choose AppBuilder and then Kendo UI Mobile. There's other capabilities here to work with other mobile frameworks, including jQuery Mobile or a DataViz application. But I'm already familiar with Kendo UI Mobile, so that's where I'm going to start. And I'll call this fritz.hybrid app, because I like to name my applications after myself. Now, when we start a new application here, we get this templated, all ready to go capability inside of my source code. What is all this doing? This looks like pretty standard HTML and JavaScript, some CSS and some MVVM capabilities that I'm familiar with. What we can do is come in here, go to our hybrid app, and say Run in Simulator. Now, since I just installed AppBuilder, it's going to prompt me to sign in with my Telerik account. Yes, keep me logged in. And my device simulator opens. So this looks like an iPhone. It looks like my iPhone 4S, actually. And I've got this great welcome screen here that's introducing me to the platform. And it looks like a native application. I've got buttons down here. I can log in. I can see my location. And I can even check out the weather. Oh man, that's going to be cold. All right. We can change the type of device that we're working with these buttons up here and the version of the operating system here. Watch this. I'm going to change this to version 7. And let's go back to the weather. And it looks and feels like it belongs on iOS 7. Now I'm zoomed out a little bit. I can zoom in and you'll see things get a bit crisper. But let's even change this from an iPhone to an iPhone 5. And I'll go to weather again. And it's got that longer screen that just feels right. All right, but let's try an Android phone. And we've got that black, that dark look and feel for our device here, and my menu bars move to the top instead of the bottom. And I can still get my same capabilities that I had before with the same code base. This is Android 4.2 that we're simulating with. Let's try an older version, maybe 2.3. And it still looks and feels good. I'm going to go back to the iPhone for a second. And I'm going to change this back to version 6 because I really like that with the blue gradients here. I want to show you what this flat button does. Kendo UI Mobile comes with a flat theme. And when you look at the standard default application that comes with this, I can click flat and I get a very simple interface here that doesn't have quite all of the gradients and plastic look and feel, and it's actually a little bit more standard to appear on different devices. My themes just look and feel nice here, but not exactly like they're a native application, like they came installed on the device. And of course, These other buttons up here allow me to turn the device, and you can see it responds just as you would expect when I change from horizontal to landscape. Let me show you these buttons over here. You can change the network settings. Right now, the device is simulating as though it was on an Ethernet connection. I can change to Wi-Fi and various cell phone capabilities. We can even test what happens when we disconnect the network. If you have some kind of a streaming application where you need to have network connection, you're going to want to test what happens to your application when you disconnect the network. What happens when the cell towers are inaccessible? I can set my location with the arrow here. And this is just a location that I picked out somewhere here in the suburbs of Philadelphia near where I live. If we had geolocation capabilities turned on some of these features over here on the phone, this map and compass over here would force the simulator to think that the device was actually in this location. See? It thinks it's where the pin is over here on the right. Finally, you can set where persistent and temporary file location will be stored on disk. This way you can inspect those files using an external browser after your application has worked with them. Okay, this is fine and all that, but let's get in there and start pulling some code out and working with where we want to put our application to be able to work with that service that's already deployed and out there running on Windows Azure. Here I am back in my index page for my hybrid project. I'm going to start to clear out some of this content here that we don't really need for this simple connection that we're going to build. I'm not going to include any mappings capabilities, and I'm going to remove some of these sample JavaScript references as well. These styles I'll remove, and now I'll start off with a clean slate of HTML markup. Now, so you don't have to watch me type this in, I've already got the code typed up over here, and I'm just going to copy and paste it in for us. I'll start off by defining a layout with a div with a data role of layout and an ID, a data ID of main. I want a header with the title of the view on it, specified by another data role, and then a button to allow me to refresh content from the server. The first screen I want to show is the order list, and I'll do that with this HTML. So I have a view with an ID of order list, specifying it's going to use the main data layout that we already added. My data model is going to come out of my order service and the view model that we're going to expose from over there. The title of this view is orders to ship. I'm going to override some content in the header so that my refresh button will actually call the refresh method on my view model when the click event occurs. I have a div with the class of orders, and then I'm going to set up an unordered list with a CSS class of orders list. That way I can do some styling later if I'd like. It has a data role of list view. Here's where my Kendo UI knowledge comes in. I'm going to use a list view widget for this. I'm going to bind the source to the orders object inside of my view model. When the click event occurs, I'm going to call the order selected function. The template for this is going to be something we call orders list template. Let me grab that script and paste it in now. So here's my template, and this is a standard Kendo template. I'm going to put the customer name in a div that's positioned in the center, and on the right I'm going to list the total number of items in their cart. I need another view now so I can show the order details. What are those line items that the pick and pack team is going to go through and pick out to put inside the package to ship to these customers? Let me paste that in now. So here's my order details view. Once again, it's using the main layout with the title of order detail. We're going to bind to a detail view model object hanging off of my order service. On my header, I'm going to add an extra button with the text back so that you can get back to the main screen with the list of orders. I'll add a list, another Kendo UI list view with the details using the details item template and the total number of items on the bottom. Let me show you what that template looks like. Another pretty standard Kendo template, data binding some text, and a quantity. Now, I've buzzed through a bunch of these features and some of the code here for this application pretty quick, but I want to stop for a second and show you how Visual Studio could help you if I was actually keying these things in live in front of you. And I know watching somebody type is probably the most boring webinar, but give me just a second here. I want to show you a couple things that come along for the ride with Visual Studio in the HTML IntelliSense and the JavaScript IntelliSense, and how Visual Studio Web Essentials can help you significantly in writing the code for your app. I'm just going to start an area here below this script, and I'm going to create another script block. And I've got all my script types sitting here that are pretty standard for web development. I'm going to choose JavaScript, of course. Now, if you remember up at the top of the page, we referenced jQuery and Kendo. So if I start a jQuery, well, I don't even have to go much further than that. But if I start typing jQuery, I get all of my IntelliSense for the jQuery object and some of my Kendo things that have been added onto it. Look, I'm going to type Kendo, and there's all my Kendo capabilities. Visual Studio is actually parsing my Kendo JavaScript file and putting these features here for me. That's incredibly handy. But not just that. Visual Studio Web Essentials has a cool feature available for us called Zen coding. It's based off of a tool called Emmet. And what Zen coding lets us do is define various features for HTML markup using CSS notation. Follow me for a second. Let's create another div. This one's going to be a view with an ID of new view. And I press tab, and it lays it all out for me. Let's take it another step. Let's start defining that for a list view. We'll have a UL with a data role of list view, and we'll call it my new list. Oh, but you know what? It's also got to have a template defined. Well, we'll come back here and we'll say data template equals my list template. And I'll hit tab. And it's built out all of that HTML for me. Handy, and if I'm thinking ahead, I can build these things quickly. When I go to build that script now for my list template, I can say script type equals text x Kendo template, and it's my list template. Inside of there, we're going to have a div, and let's have a div with position center class with a sibling div of position right. And it generated the script tag appropriately for me. So it's easy to go and build out lots of HTML quickly if you know the types of structures you need. Especially if there's things like the list view where I don't have any content inside of it. It's going to be bound to that with MVVM later. You can generate and build lots of HTML quickly. I don't need these for this sample though. What about some of those other properties of the application? How do I set up the different things like my app icons and my splash screens? AppBuilder has that all configured for you inside the project properties. So I'll go to Project and Fritz Hybrid App Properties. And now I've got different configuration options for each one of the platforms that we're targeting. And here's where I can specify the icons for the appropriate devices at the appropriate file sizes. Same thing for the iPad. Any search result icons can be defined here. Splash screens, you can define your splash screens here for iPhone and iPad. And then if we go down into Android, it's a similar experience. Here's where I define my icons. Here's where I define my splash screens. Windows Phone, it's the same thing. App icon. Here's where I define my tiles. And my splash screen. So that's how we can make our application look good inside of Visual Studio without having to go through and manage all the configuration throughout our project. It's just done for us, and all the configuration is being taken care of through these easy to use graphical user interfaces. All right, enough of that. Let's run over to the JavaScript and configure it for this page. Let me go over to my app.js file and paste in the script that I've already got written for this. So going through this, you can see here's the URL where my web API is exposed that I've written inside of my web application. I've written a function called getOrders that will go out and get that API and set on the view model the orders object with the data that it finds. Let me test that API using Fiddler so we can see what kind of data we get back. Here in Fiddler, I've opened the composer and I'm going to do a get against my Azure website. And I'm going to specify my accept is text JSON. When I execute and open my results here, let's format the JSON. You can easily see how my order information is coming in. Here's my customer, the games they've ordered, in an array. There's a game with the stock location, and then another game with the quantity defined for each. Cool. Let's get back over to our JavaScript and check out how we can work with that to make that data appear and bind to our user interface. While that script is running, I can show and hide a loading animation so that our end users know that there's work being done in the background. I've defined an order service that's a Kendo class that defines the view model as a Kendo observable and handles the navigation when an order is selected. Here's where it's going to go collect the games that were ordered, put them on the details of the detail view model, and carry along the item count. We'll wire up the back function so that it knows to go back in the history stack. And here's where we add our event listener for the device ready event. So when the device is ready to go and the application's been loaded, we're going to define a new Kendo mobile application with the main layout and go get the orders. Let's run this in our simulator and see what it looks like. Not bad. I've got my list of 3 orders with the total number of items each is ordered. When I click on an order, it opens and shows me exactly the products that were ordered. I can go back, select another order, and it refreshes to show me here's what that person has ordered. Not bad at all. But what about getting this on a device so I can test it and see what it looks like over there? Here's where I'm going to need to engage what I'm going to call camera number 2 here so that you can see me use the QR code with my iPhone and look at this application on a real device. Back here in Visual Studio, I'm going to start bringing up and getting ready to deploy to my iPhone by going to the AppBuilder menu. Build Fritz Hybrid App in Cloud. And I get this prompt. Which environment do I want to work with? I have an iPhone device here, so I'm going to choose iOS. My choices are AppBuilder with the companion app that's installed from the Apple Store, or I can provision. If I've already got a developer license, I can actually configure my device, connect it with a USB cable to my laptop, and deploy a full binary over to my iPhone. It's so much easier to do this with the QR code using the AppBuilder companion app. Let me show you how that works. I'll click Next. And I get this QR code. Now I'm going to shift to camera 2 here for a sec so you can see me scan this QR code and how it opens the app and gets us a real application running on the device. And now using my iPhone here, I have a QR code reader app. I'm just going to line this up with the QR code on the screen. And there it is. Come on. There we go. It's going to scan it. It's going to launch the AppBuilder app. And there's my application. Alright, I hope you enjoyed those demos as much as I enjoyed writing them for you. If you've been in some of my other webinars, you know that I'm not going to let you go without telling you some of the cool things that we have going. Now, I'm a little bit sneaky about some of these things. I like to get the dish from the marketing and engineering teams before they go and announce it to other people. So, listen, I'm going to tell you some of these things. They're going to be coming soon. I took it right out of the marketing team's hands. I could get in trouble for telling you about some of these things. We're going to be releasing something called Data Link for Microsoft SQL Server. Now what this does is it's going to provide a pipeline for your data through to Telerik backend services. Just like I did in my sample there, where I had to write a web API to expose my data, you're not going to need to do that. Okay? We're going to have lightweight and optimized for mobile services generated and exposed for you using your SQL Server data. We're going to introduce Visual Studio integration for backend services. You're going to be able to browse and manage service configuration from within Visual Studio. You can already do this with your own internal servers and Windows Azure capabilities. Well, soon you're going to be able to do that with Telerik backend services. We're going to introduce Windows Phone 8 support for the AppBuilder companion app. You're going to get that QR code scanning and loading goodness that I showed you in that demo. That's going to make things so much easier when you want to build and debug applications on Windows Phone. Finally, we're going to introduce a cloud code debugger for Visual Studio. You can already write custom JavaScript code inside of our backend services to trigger additional business rules. We're going to give you the ability to debug that code from within Visual Studio. All right, remember, don't tell anybody these things. I don't want to get in trouble, okay? There's a couple things you can do to get started today. Go to platform.telerik.com to sign up. If you don't already have a Telerik account, you can log in with Facebook, Microsoft Live ID, Google, or Yahoo. It's free to sign up, free to get started, and see what all the excitement is about. Once you've done that, you can download the software development kits from the platform website for .NET, JavaScript, and a bunch of other languages that you aren't really going to want to use in Visual Studio. So why don't you just stick to .NET and JavaScript and be done with it, okay? When you get back to Visual Studio, go into the Tools menu, Extensions and Updates, and search for Telerik AppBuilder. There's a screenshot here for you in case you forget what that looked like. Go ahead and install that add-in and you'll get the project templates, Kendo UI locally, and everything you need to run the simulator so that you can get started building iOS, Android, and Windows Phone applications using Telerik AppBuilder and the Telerik Platform. Finally, on your iPhone or iPad, go download the Telerik AppBuilder app. You can find that in the iTunes Store, or go to bit.ly/iOS App Builder to find the iTunes webpage where you can install it from. If you're like me and you're just as excited about using your mobile phone to do computing and navigation and tinkering with apps, then you want to get started right now. Look, it's even turned an old web guy like me into an app builder. I'm going to release my first app in the next month. I'm so excited. You have nothing to lose. Check it out, platform.telerik.com today. Listen, reach out and contact me. If you have any questions about Telerik AppBuilder, about Visual Studio, any of our ASP.NET products, I'm your man. Reach me at fritz@telerik.com. My personal blog is at c#fritz.com. My Telerik blog, where I talk about things ASP.NET, at blogstelerik.com/JeffFritz. Hit me up on Twitter. I am C#Fritz. I'm always there ready to engage in a good conversation and answer your questions. Well, thanks a lot for participating in this webinar about Telerik AppBuilder and Visual Studio. I'm going to open the Q&A log here, take a look at some of your questions, and see what I can answer here in the remaining time we have.